Welcome back to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker, the weekly radio show that informs and educates you on how to buy or sell real estate with Barb Schlinker, the owner broker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. Now, Barb, many home sellers worry that they have to set aside money to pay capital gains taxes when they sell their home. So, what are some of the tax issues that home sellers must know before putting their Colorado Springs area home up for sale?
Well, if it's not on your radar, a lot of people don't pay attention to it. But in 1998, they changed the law. It used to be if you made a profit on the sale of the home, you either had to buy a more expensive home and roll the money into your next home to avoid capital gains, or you would have to pay it. So what has changed is if you're not married and you profit less than 250,000, that money is tax free and you don't have to do anything with it. If you're married, it's 500,000 of profit tax free on the sale. And so that works for most people. I see very few instances where a home seller is facing capital gains tax. And a lot of people don't realize that the money isn't taken out of the closing, it's taken out the following year when you file your taxes. So this is one of those topics where you really want to talk to your tax professional and be sure about it going in. Every once in a while, people might have to pay a little bit in capital gains. If it's an investment property, there's a way to avoid capital gains by doing what's called a 1031 exchange. It's like exchanging your equity for one property to another. A lot of rules around that one. But in general, most people selling their primary residence will not have to pay. I just sold a lady's house where she bought it before she moved here in 2018, and then they rented it for a while. Then they moved into it for 2 years and rented it, I think, one more year, and then turned around and sold it. So she actually made a pretty good profit, but she doesn't have to worry about capital gains because she lived in it 2 of the last 5 years, and it was her primary residence when she sold it. Um, and so, basically, I sit down at these closings all the time. And what happens at the closing table is that the closer will have you fill out this form to determine whether or not they're going to issue what's called a 1099 for the profit on the sale of the home. That doesn't mean you owe taxes, it's just the way you answer the questions. Have you lived in it 2 of the last 5 years? Did you use it for business? Did you use it for rental? Are you married and is the sales price over 250 or 500? Are you single and is the sales price over 250? Those are the questions. And if you answer false to any of them, because it's really weird the way it's written, but it's true false questions, they will issue a 1099, but that doesn't mean that you have to pay capital gains tax. All that means is next year when you file your taxes, you'll take a look at it, and you have to tell them about the sale of the property anyway, but this way you'll know whether or not you have to set aside a little bit of money for profit on the sale of the home. And so you could call us anytime if you want to talk to us about it. A lot of people have questions about it. They assume that it's the net proceeds, like how much money they put in their pocket when it sells, that determines that 250 or 500. And it's really not. There's a calculation that's done based on what they paid for the home. You add on top of that all the money that you put into the home, and then you deduct the selling expenses when you sell it. And in very few cases do they have to worry about capital gains. So if you'd like to ask us questions about it, you're welcome to give us a call at 719-301-3900, or you could go to barbhasthebuyers.com. We help home sellers week in and week out. So if you are thinking of making a move, give us a call at 719-301-3900. One of the things that we do is a free in-home consultation. We'll look at your home, we'll bring similar sales, we'll bring similar competition, we'll give you a really good idea what your home will sell for right now in this market. We show up with a half dozen or more offers on your house, cash offers. And the reason why people might like a cash offer is maybe they don't want to prepare their home for sale. Maybe they want to sell it quickly, like in a few weeks. Maybe they want to sell it as is. Maybe they don't want to deal with the whole thing of strangers coming through their house. We have those options for home sellers. So if you are interested in that, it's a free, no cost obligation. I'm sorry, it's free. There's no obligation to give us a call at 719-301-3900 or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Sure.
You're listening to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. And if you're interested in selling or buying, call Barb at 719-301-3900. And we're talking about whether a home seller has to pay taxes on the profit when they sell their home. So, Barb, how can sellers find out more about taxes when they're selling?
Well, Richard, I would say, we can give you a rough idea, but it's always a really good idea to talk with a tax professional about this if you're worried about it. I remember selling a home a few years back. It sold in a bidding war for just under 1.2 million. And he put about 600,000 into it. So it was really close. So he did call his tax professional to find out if he was going to have to pay capital gains, and the tax professional said no. And generally, if you do have to pay capital gains, it's only on the amount above your $500,000 exemption if you're married, and $250,000 exemption if you're not. So it's good to talk to a tax professional. We can help you with that. But in general, it's the following year. So I tell people if they're worried about it, maybe just set aside a little bit to pay those capital gains taxes the next year. And we're happy to answer questions about it at any time. Richard?
Barb, taxes can be very confusing for all people, but even for business people, homeowners certainly. So, what can sellers do? So, what can sellers do to find out more about taxes when they're going to sell?
Well, there's a lot of good information on the internet, but it's very confusing. Like it'll say, well, okay, if you're in this tax bracket and you make this much money, how do you know? And the basic thing is if you just look at the basis of the house, you take what you paid for it, you add on top of that price all the money that you put into the home. You don't have to have receipts. A lot of people ask me that. So you would add on top, like if you got a new roof or you got new windows, or maybe you put in new appliances, or maybe you put in new carpet, anything like that adds to the basis. In other words, it takes away from your gain, right? So you add all those things on top. So let's say you started paying 250, you might have put 50,000 in the home. So now you're at 300,000 as your basis. You go to sell it. Let's say it sells for 600,000. You would minus off your closing costs, which is commission, tax, and title. That could easily be 50,000. Profit then would be 250. So if you're married, you would not have a capital gain because it has to be 500,000 in profit. If you're single, you might be close, but that's okay. Anything above that 250 or $500,000 mark is the number that you would have to pay taxes on above that. So let's say your gain is 510,000, you're going to have to pay taxes on 10,000, not 510,000. And if you have a rental property, that's the case that could spark a capital gain. So what I see a lot of people doing is what they call a 1031 exchange. And basically, you can set this up about a week before you sell the property. You bring in this third party that is an exchange person that basically, when the home sells, all or even part of the net proceeds go to the 1031 exchanger, and they hold that money for you to purchase your next investment property. You have to pick the property within 45 days, and you have to close on it within 6 months. And that way you avoid paying any taxes on the profit. You just kind of roll it into the next house, and you can do this over and over and over again as long as you're holding on to that property as an investment property. And so there are some people that took some of it out. I just had one seller that sold a rental property, and they took some of that money out when they sold it, and they exchanged some of it. So they only had to pay taxes on the amount that they took out of the property. And so that's another solution for home sellers that are selling an investment property. Nobody likes paying taxes. There's nothing fun about that. But I definitely would talk with your tax professional about it. Either way, if you need to sell, then you need to sell, right? And the good news is we're talking about profit. So all of that, you just may have to set aside a little bit for the government. The other thing that sometimes they tax is if you're an out of state investor, sometimes the title companies will hold back 2%. Like if you never lived in the state and you're selling a rental property, they will hold back 2% of the sale, and you'll have to file taxes with the state of Colorado the following year. And if you're a foreign investor, in other words, you don't have a green card, you're not a US citizen or anything, and you bought a piece of real estate and you're selling it, the title companies will hold back 20% to make sure the government gets their cut. So, but in most cases, the title companies for citizens, they're not holding back any money at the sale. It's just for planning purposes when you file your taxes the following year. So that's how it works. But I would always recommend you talk to your tax professional. Plus, we can do that calculation for you, and just give you kind of a rough idea whether or not you have to worry about a 1031 exchange, or you have to worry about capital gains. Give us a call at 719-301-3900 or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
You want an agent who has the knowledge and the experience to help you with solutions to your home sales problem, regardless of your situation or your budget. Barb's team can get you ready. Barb and her team have the cash offer program and the offer of 100% of market value, or Barb will pay you the difference. To find out more, give her a call at 719-301-3900 or simply go to barbhasthebuyers.com. A short break. When we come back, we'll be talking with Barb about the benefits of considering a cash offer on your home, plus Barb's hot new listings. Stay tuned for that.